You are listening to part 52 of our series, 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan, and welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Hi, Gemini. This has been a wonderful month here talking about blood pressure and blood pressure drugs, although we feared that our blood pressure went up from all the information about those blood pressure drugs. So if you didn't come in at the beginning of the month, you might want to go back and raise your blood pressure a little bit listening to what we had to say about the horrors of blood pressure drugs. And I love that one MD who said taking a blood pressure drug is just stupid.
Yes.
This is from an MD. This is not from some, off-the-wall herbalist or
right.
A severe chiropractor or, some Chinese sage. This is from an MD who works with ordinary people and really believes that none of us should be taking drugs to deal with our blood pressure because the lifestyle and dietary changes are so amazingly effective. And again, last week, we really went into detail, thanks to Harvard, which gave us specific figures for how much lowering we could expect. 5 minutes of meditation a day will lower that systolic, that upper number, by 20 points. That's a huge amount for a tiny amount of time spent. Once you do meditate for 5 minutes a day, you might want to increase your practice because you'll really enjoy the feeling that you get. But what I suggest to people is keep it at 5 minutes for a real long time because most of us can do 5 minutes a day of meditation no matter what, no matter how busy or crazy your day is. It's usually pretty easy to find 5 minutes to fit in. Whereas once we start getting more elaborate, I'm going to do it for 20 minutes, half an hour, then the time becomes hard to find, and rather than a daily practice, we have a sometimes, but mostly not. We talked about all kinds of delicious food that we can eat that can help us as well, and a variety of other lifestyle changes. And I promised that we would talk this week about 3 truly wonderful herbs. This certainly will not be the first time I have talked about motherwort, passionflower, and hawthorn here at Time Monk Radio, and it certainly will not be the last time. These are 3 herbs that I myself use quite frequently and that I find incredibly beneficial for a wide range of problems. Right now, throughout most of the Northeast and on somewhat across the plains and a little bit into the western states, Leonurus cardiaca, motherwort, is blooming. And motherwort has a very long bloom cycle. It usually starts blooming around summer solstice and generally will still be in bloom at fall equinox. So motherwort can bloom for months. It will re-bloom if it's cut. The flowering top of the plant is the part that is used. So if you cut that flowering top, then motherwort will reflower. So you can cut it and come again and cut again. The motherwort here at Laughing Rock Farm this year is so enormous that I'm almost afraid to walk past it. It's truly over my head. The tincture made from the fresh flowering tops of motherwort is tasty and very effective. A tincture made from dried motherwort is not tasty at all. As a matter of fact, it usually tastes bitter and makes people kind of spit and go, ick, 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 ick. What is that nasty stuff? And it's not nearly so effective either. So we have a situation here that's not uncommon when we're working with herbs, in that if we just say motherwort does this, we're not being specific enough. Last week, I mentioned that herbs in pills is what's usually used in the study. So usually an herb is dried, powdered, and put into a capsule and then studied in that way. And that I do not find herbs in capsules to be anywhere near as effective, and I find them far more dangerous, not to even mention how unspeakably expensive they are. So just saying the name of the herb isn't enough. If I said motherwort will lower blood pressure, that wouldn't really get you very far. You might go wandering into a store and say, do you have motherwort? And who knows, they might sell you a pill of dried powdered motherwort. I don't think that it would work at all that way. In more likelihood, they would sell you a tincture of motherwort, but usually made from the dried plant. And I do not find that tincture that effective either. So what I am talking about is a tincture of the flowering top of motherwort made immediately after the plant has been harvested. Now, I do use 100 proof vodka, and I do strongly prefer that for my tinctures, but anything 100 proof or higher. And one of my favorite tincture making places, Red Moon Herbs, has switched over to high proof organic grain alcohol because they were using some herbs that needed higher proof. And Catskill Mountain Herbals, another favored source for tinctures made from fresh plants. Both of these places will give you a tincture made from fresh motherwort, both of them wild harvest or grow in their gardens. Motherwort harvested at just the right time, tincture it up fresh right then within 5 minutes of harvesting it, and provide a delightful tincture for you. That's Red Moon Herbs or Catskill Mountain Herbals. If you buy a tincture in a store, look carefully to see whether or not it's made from dried plant material. One of the first people to ask me about herbs to lower her blood pressure is a nurse. And being a nurse, she was very aware of the dangers of taking drugs to lower her blood pressure. As a matter of fact, she was one of the first people who kind of opened my eyes to the possibility that blood pressure drugs were not safe, and although they lowered blood pressure, didn't actually make our heart or cardiovascular system healthy. She was a woman who, as a nurse, worked in a very stressful position, and her home life was also providing some stress for her as well. So I immediately thought of motherwort. To me, motherwort is like sitting in your mother's lap. It's calming. It has a deep and pervasive effect throughout the entire nervous system, so that when we have stress, we respond to that stress with less cortisol, and we have less reason to be stressed when we're taking motherwort. So we have a primary action of improving the reaction to stress, so that that third factor that raises blood pressure, those stress hormones, decrease in the body very naturally without using a drug. Motherwort is not a diuretic. It's not an ACE inhibitor. It's not a beta blocker. It's not a calcium channel blocker. It doesn't do any of those things that we've been studying. We don't really even know what motherwort does or how it lowers blood pressure, but we do know that it increases the amount of capillaries that go to the heart. And so it might simply be that motherwort so strengthens and so tonifies the heart and so feeds the heart that the heart is able to beat and push blood through the blood vessels with less force because it itself is stronger. Again, the mechanism of an herb is very difficult to know precisely because an herb contains hundreds of different constituents. But back to our nurse. She took a dropperful of motherwort tincture twice a day for 6 weeks and found that her upper number, the systolic number, had dropped 12 points and her lower number had dropped 8 points. That is a major drop, and most drugs will not give you that kind of drop. When we then talked about lifestyle factors, including meditation, exercise, beets, chocolate, a whole host of other things, we were able, within a 3-month period, to get her blood pressure completely out of even the pre-hypertension range. She had been up into already moderate hypertension, and we were able to get her back to very healthy hypertension with the use of motherwort tincture twice a day. She then wondered if she could stop taking the motherwort. And certainly there wouldn't be any particular reason to have to continue to take it unless I said, you're under any stress. And she looked at me and laughed. She said, right, unless I'm under any stress. I said, so maybe motherwort is just going to be your ally, and you're going to take some motherwort each morning and each evening. In the morning to help move through the stress of the day, and in the evening because those herbs and drugs that we're taking to help protect the heart and help lower blood pressure are more effective when taken just before we're going to sleep at night. Motherwort. I never leave home without my motherwort tincture. It is certainly like having my mom with me. I'm so glad to know that when I get nervous, I can take something that not only quells my nervousness, but lowers my blood pressure and helps my heart as well. As a matter of fact, I often recommend that if you're around someone who's having what is it? Is it a panic attack or a heart attack? They can be really difficult to tell the difference between a panic attack and a heart attack. And so what I suggest you do is give the person a dropper full of motherwort tincture. If it was a panic attack, it will stop within a minute or two. If it's a heart attack, you will have improved the person's chances of surviving that heart attack, but the heart attack won't stop from giving them motherwort. A low-dose aspirin is another thing you can give someone. If it wasn't a panic attack and you're calling the ambulance, give them a low-dose aspirin. That will also increase their chances of surviving that heart attack. Hawthorn is a plant in the rose family. An apple a day keeps the doctor away, and cherries are for heart health because they're bright red and they look like hearts, and so are strawberries for heart health because they are bright red and look like hearts. And all of these plants are in the rose family. Hawthorn has bright red haws. No, they don't look like hearts. They look like elongated, smallish rose hips, and I've actually seen some rose hips that look a lot like haws. There are many different species of hawthorn, and they are all used in basically the same way. We talked about using the motherwort tincture, using fresh motherwort. And although I would dearly love to make a tincture using fresh hawthorn berries, and have on occasion had an opportunity to do it when I was visiting someone, and others who have bearing hawthorns by them have shared some of their tincture with me. But usually I make my hawthorn tincture from dried hawthorn berries. A flowering plant like motherwort loses much of its magic and much of its ability as it's dried. But a berry or a haw, like the hawthorn haws, lose little to none of its magic or its ability in drying, because that form is the storage form for the plant. Now, hawthorn leaves and flowers can also be used. And if we're going to use those as a tincture, we again want to tincture them fresh. We harvest the hawthorn leaves and flowers and tincture it. I just planted a hawthorn here on the land, a gift from someone, and it's such a baby little tree that I go out there several times a week to just say, are you okay? Are you surviving? I mean, this is such a small little tree that it's being overshadowed by the nettle, which I need to go and cut down again. So I am not expecting to get many hawthorn leaves or many hawthorn flowers or even any hawthorn berries for quite a while yet, but I'm very happy to finally have a hawthorn to grow. So I buy the dried hawthorn berries. I fill any size jar 1/3 and no more than 1/3. So if you're eyeballing it and you're not sure it's a third, a little less than a third. Sometimes they say between 1/4 and a third. Between 25 and 30% of the jar is filled with dried hawthorn berries. Then whatever alcohol you're using, and it should be 100 proof or greater, I like 100 proof vodka, is poured over the hawthorn berries to fill the jar to the very top. That needs to be shaken because the berries are dried and we need to get the liquid in among them. And it's a good idea to shake it daily for, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days a week, just till the berries get all starting to move and groove in there. And then you can just let it sit. Now, most tinctures are ready to use in 6 weeks. If you cut your fresh motherwort, chop it up, make a fresh motherwort tincture, it's ready to use in 6 weeks. And so technically, your dried hawthorn berry tincture could be ready to use in 6 weeks. But truthfully, I like to let mine sit for a year. I see changes. I see things happening in there. I feel that I have made a better remedy, a more effective remedy, when I let it sit for a year. And so what I often suggest that people do is to buy a significant quantity of hawthorn berries. A pound of hawthorn berries is not very expensive. And to set up several jars of hawthorn berry tincture. And that's because you're going to want to take hawthorn berry tincture at least once a day, if not several times a day. And hawthorn is what I would call a lifelong ally. I use motherwort when I need motherwort, when I'm having particular things that are going on that would suggest to me that motherwort would be an excellent thing. But I use hawthorn every single day as a heart tonic and a way to make sure that my blood pressure stays in a healthy range. So it makes sense to me to make quantities of hawthorn at a time because I'm going to be using it all year, and I'm going to be using it year after year. Hawthorn for the aging heart. Hawthorn improves the effectiveness of the heartbeat, thus lowering blood pressure. No herb works like a drug. Remember that one of the problems with the blood pressure lowering drugs is that they lower the blood pressure too much. You get dizzy, you faint, you fall, and you break your head open. Motherwort doesn't do that. Hawthorn doesn't do that. They don't go in and have a direction of action and say, stop now, lower this blood pressure. What they do is they say, how can we help? How can we make this cardiovascular system work better? In fact, hawthorn is the herb most suggested for people with low blood pressure. Now, that seems really weird, doesn't it? It's like, what? And this is because herbs have a global effect. They can actually do two different things because herbs are not blocking calcium channels. They're not sitting like Rottweilers at receptor sites. Herbs are going in, especially hawthorn, going in and nourishing, doing deep tissue nourishing the endothelium of the blood vessels, nourishing the heart muscle itself, nourishing our ability to have a healthy cardiovascular system. The story that I tell over and over again is of my sweetheart who, after having had bypass surgery, was confronted by the surgeon who did the job. And he said, from the amount of blockage in your arteries, we were expecting there to be significant damage to your heart because those blood vessels where they do the bypass actually serve the heart muscle and feed the heart muscle. And when they're clogged, when blood isn't getting through there, the heart muscle dies. He says, but your heart is one of the healthiest hearts that I've seen, despite having 3 out of 4 blood vessels 80% clogged. All right? So his heart was getting less than half of the amount of blood infusion that it needed. Despite that, there was not a single dead cell anywhere in his heart. Oh, did I mention that my sweetheart takes hawthorn 2 dropperfuls 2 or 3 times a day? And if he's under particular stress, he might take 3 or even 4 dropperfuls of hawthorn tincture. Hawthorn is a nutritive herb like rosehips, apples, cherries, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, and so it can be used in lavish quantities, any amount that we want. Hawthorn for the aging heart. I heard myself saying that over and over, and as I got into my 60s, that message made me think, gosh, perhaps I have an aging heart here as I'm sailing on past 60 and even into my 70s. And so I take a dropperful of hawthorn tincture on a daily basis. Try it. I think you'll like it. Passion flower is not a plant that I find very easy to grow because it likes it hot. Passion flower grows quite wildly all through Hawaii. You'll find passion flower growing wild in Florida, especially southern Florida. I wouldn't be surprised to find it in the whole southern tier of states, right from Southern California into Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, and moving all down that. Probably the biggest passion flower plant that I ever saw was in Arizona. And we were in a room big enough for a table to seat 10 people, and there was an arbor over it, and one passion flower vine completely covered that entire arbor. Now, I can grow passion flower vine in a pot on my deck, and I can even get it to flower, but it will never, ever, ever set fruit. When we were in Costa Rica this past winter, we visited a farm, and the farmer primarily grew ginger and turmeric, two great tropical area crops. And he was farming a big piece of land, basically all by himself. And turmeric and ginger are the kind of crops that you throw in the ground and then stand back is going to be explosion of roots, so they're pretty easy to grow. And the third crop that he had planted that he really depended on for his income was passion flower. He was very surprised to find out that it was called passion flower because he, of course, called it passion fruit. And he was growing it for the fruits, and he got a very good fruit production. And when I told him that the leaves and the flowers were an herbal medicine, you have rarely seen a person more astonished. The stuff that he had to kind of paw through to get to the fruits that he thought valuable was in and of itself tremendously valuable. When I grow passion flower, I tincture the passion flowers themselves in 100 proof vodka, and I pick them on the day that they bloom. Passion flowers usually only bloom for one day. So you pretty much have to be right there, focusing in on it, and harvesting that flower. I start by filling a wide-mouthed jar, about half full, with my 100 proof vodka. And then day by day, as the passion flower blooms, I enjoy it all day. And before it dies and closes up in the late afternoon, I pluck it and put it into my alcohol. When there's enough passion flowers in there that there's not quite enough alcohol, I add a little more alcohol. And in this way, day by day throughout the summer, I'm able to make my passion flower tincture. The places that I mentioned before do have fresh passion flower tincture. And again, I find that the dried passion flower tincture or passion flower in the form of a pill is not effective. However, if you do have dried passion flower, and that includes the leaves, passion flower leaves are used as a medicine, then taking it as a tea or an infusion, since it's a non-aromatic herb, passion flower is just fine to use as an infusion, and we find that quite effective. If you grow passion flower, you will have lots and lots of leaves, and they're pretty easy to dry. They're not high in protein, and that might be your preferred form of taking it. Passion flower, to me, has the ability to lower blood pressure by opening the heart. Now, I'm being a little evocative and poetic and maybe even romantic here, since after all we are talking about the heart. But what do we call this plant? We call it passiflora, passion flower. And passion is something that we have in our heart. And we talked about the fact that one of the things that causes high blood pressure is rigidity, is an inability to be flexible. And so we could translate that into a stiff heart, a hard heart. We talk about hard-hearted people, don't we? It's not just the blood vessels. Passion flower I believe, lowers blood pressure because it softens the heart. And again, I'm talking poetically here. We're not talking about, we're making the heart muscle mush and it doesn't work anymore. No, it actually improves the functioning of the heart muscle. But it softens the emotional heart. It softens us to ourselves. It softens us to life as it is. And I believe that passion flower gives us the heart of the eagle. When I take passion flower tincture and I sit with my body, I feel those long, green feathered wings that are in my heart open up and stretch out to either side. And I feel that my heart takes flight like a great eagle falling up as it steps off the cliff. And that sense of flowing through the air, my wings beating, and being supported by everything in life, says to me, Susan, your blood pressure is smiling up at you, girl. This plant is making your heart smile and fly. So, there we have it. What's bad about blood pressure lowering drugs? What's great about lifestyle changes? And 3 herbs that are my favorites for working with blood pressure. I had another student who was quite concerned about her blood pressure. The doctor was really up in arms, in fact, about her blood pressure. It had gone from pre-hypertension to mild hypertension to moderate hypertension, and she had refused drugs this entire time and had tried the lifestyle changes that we had talked about. And although they were, as her doctor put it, slowing her progression. In other words, the doctor said, well, I would have expected that it would have gotten worse a lot sooner, but it's still getting worse. So what you're doing isn't good enough. You're going to have to use drugs. And she came to me truly not wanting to use drugs and asking if there was anything else she could possibly use. I knew somewhat of the circumstances of her life, and I could also see through facial diagnosis some constriction, some rigidity, some, shall we say, barriers around her heart. You know, all of us have experienced broken heart, and we have a choice when our heart has been broken. We can use that breaking of our heart to open the heart to life and love and experience, or we can use the sharp shards of our broken heart to set up a barbed wire fence around our heart and around our lives to protect us against ever being hurt in that way again. And I was pretty clear, although I didn't know her very well, that this was, in fact, the choice that she had made, and maybe hadn't even made it consciously, but that she had been so hurt by what had happened in her life that she had chosen to erect a really powerful defense and barrier around her heart in working with Passiflora, in taking a dropperful of the tincture 2 or 3 times a day over a period of 3 months. We were able slowly to bring her out of the dangerous range of hypertension down into moderate hypertension. And with continued working, we talked about changing her meditation method, because in fact her meditation method was really stressing her out. And so instead of meditation, we got her involved in a Qigong class and just a few other small lifestyle tricks like the beet juice that we talked about. And we were eventually able to bring her blood pressure back to pre-hypertension, kind of verging on mild hypertension, at which point her doctor decided that she did not indeed need to take any drugs. Well, it's been a month of blood pressure, and next month we're going to continue to look at drugs that are extremely commonly prescribed in the United States, and those are cholesterol-lowering drugs. The news about cholesterol-lowering drugs is perhaps even worse than the news about blood pressure-lowering drugs. But we'll be back next week to jump into that and talk about that. Jim and I, as always, have had a wonderful time with you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to remind us all that herbal medicine is people's medicine. There are green blessings right outside our doors. Good night.
Thank you so much, Susan. And this concludes part 52 of our series, The 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.